Good evening and welcome to another live stream of Don't Talk TV. Tonight I've got another fantastic guest. We've got Warrant Officer James Topp, who's doing Canada marches, who's marching from British Columbia all the way to Ottawa. He's in Ontario right now and he's joining us. I mean, this is the definition of hardcore. He's joining us while he's marching for this live stream. Good evening. My name is Nicholas Wansbutter. I'm a lawyer in Stratford, Ontario, Canada, and welcome to Don't Talk TV. And as I said, with us we have James Topp, Canada Marches. And as you can see, he's doing exactly that, marching along the side of the highway. James, what highway is that you're marching along the side of right now?
Hi there. We're just on Highway 17. We're about an hour out of Sault Ste. Marie.
Okay, so I mean that's impressive. I guess you've covered well over 3,500 kilometers at this point, then.
Yes.
All right, so let me just give our viewers a little bit of a background about you, and then maybe we'll discuss a bit more, because I think viewers would like to hear a little bit more about you and what you're about. But just as the basics, James Topp is a serving soldier in the Canadian Armed Forces, currently in the reserves, was in the regular force. He holds the rank of warrant officer, and he's been a member of the Canadian Armed Forces for 28 years. As I understand it, he's in the process of being released from the Canadian Armed Forces for engaging in open, peaceful protest. And as I said, he's doing Canada marches. It's a march across the country from, as I said, from BC to Ottawa for the purpose of protesting the federal government mandates that require, as a condition of employment, vaccination. He's stepping forward to speak on behalf of Canadian Armed Forces members in particular, and members of the federal government who are being denied access to employment or services, or have suffered from damaged relationships as a result of these mandates. And he's also stepping forward to speak on behalf of those who, through the introduction of false constructs surrounding choices and consequences, being pressured into taking part in medical procedures that they otherwise wouldn't have accepted, but for the fear of losing the ability to put food on the table. So that's kind of the basics. But James, if you don't mind, maybe could you just take us back a little bit? A 28-year career, I'm sure there's a lot to talk about, but could you just give us a little brief overview of what your career has looked like?
Yeah, absolutely. I joined in the early 90s. I joined the Army. I remained in the Army. I'm in the infantry branch. I served in the BPCLI, Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, and the Royal Canadian Regiment. I spent, and then currently I'm in the reserves. I spent approximately three and a half, almost 4 years in my first contract. Got out, got back into the Army for a total of 28 years. I've done a number of tours overseas, including Croatia, Bosnia, and Macedonia, and Afghanistan. So I transferred from the regular Army over to the Reserve Force in 2019. And in doing so, in case for the viewers who are not aware, basically you're moving from full-time 24/7 commitment to a part-time commitment in the armed forces, and that enabled me to pursue a career in an alternative field, which I did. So in case folks aren't aware, I'm also a public servant employee of the RCMP, currently on leave without pay from that organization, and for the same reasons I'm being released from the armed forces. So altogether, I I had an outstanding career, I would say. Um, as a young man in the forces, I was prone to mix it up a little bit, but I spent a good 20 years being a good soldier, doing the business of training the troops, going overseas, fulfilling the missions of the UN, NATO, and Canadian Army. So to have to be told that I was going to be released from the armed forces for my failure to comply with the Chief of Defense Staff directive on vaccination policy, I felt like it was a slap in the face, because I feel that even as a federal government employee of two different federal government departments, I still don't think that they have the right to tell me how to be healthy or what gets injected into my body, given the evidence that we had and that we have now. So, with regards to my public service career, that was also placed on hold for the exact same reasons. And again, it's not so much my issue with vaccines. My issue is with the abuse of authority on the part of the federal government.
Right. So you said you've trained troops. Just out of interest, have you spent some time in Gagetown teaching young officers there?
I have.
Okay, yeah, that's a very well. I mean, a man who's ruck marching 4,000 plus kilometers and doing a live feed. I was thinking to myself, yeah, that's a warrant officer in the mold of those who instructed me. I was an infantry officer back in the late 90s and early 2000s. So I did my time in Gagetown. So I'm sure you taught young, foolish men like myself who. I mean, back, man, I was 19 years old. That was like way too young to be an officer. Sometimes I think when I look back, but I mean, I got whipped into shape and I learned.
Well, you were moldable. That's the thing, right? I mean, at that particular point, I wouldn't have been a warrant officer, but I'm probably sure we crossed paths at some point on different courses in Gagetown.
Yeah, we may have. I spent a couple of summers there. So yeah, and that just kind of makes me think of something I wanted to go back to when you talk about your career. What was it like going back 28 years ago? What prompted you? Like, what made you want to join the Canadian Armed Forces and specifically the infantry?
It was. I didn't have any high-minded ideals. Let me put it that way. I joined because I wanted to. It was for the adventure, for the travel. Experience the point of the tip of the spear, so to speak, of the combat arms, and it didn't kind of dawn on me until much later in my life and my career. How much of that I owed to the Canadian public, but to say that I joined up with those with the ideas of contributing to international peace and security, I have to admit that wasn't on my mind in the very beginning. So it wasn't until what I saw happen, over the last 7 or 8, well, let's face it, 2 years. This is where I really began to realize there's a problem, and it was the protests in Ottawa and the way that folks came together there, and to see veterans there standing with that community because they weren't taken in by the false reporting and the lies put out by the corporate media. What happened to me was that I got placed on leave without pay, and then was denied any time to collect any money with the or to how do I put this, to work with the reserves and get any sort of income. I ended up getting an employment in with a tow truck company out of Hope, BC, and that's kind of what really opened my eyes. Like I had always known, so to speak, but what really opened my eyes was working in the private sector, really for the first time in my adult life, and seeing how hard the Canadian public works, and then realizing, well, this is what we're here to do in the service, is to protect their way of life. That's the role of the Canadian Armed Forces, is to protect the security of the nation, or ensure the security of the nation, and the nation is its people.
Mm-hmm.
So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it does. And just saying, I think in the United States, I believe their military actually takes an oath to the Constitution. In Canada, we don't, or soldiers don't take an oath to the Constitution. It's an oath to the Queen. But I think you've encapsulated there. I mean, the Queen still represents the people, and that's who the Canadian Armed Forces ultimately serve. And as you said, protect that way of life. And I think what you're doing is the most heroic thing in the current milieu, to protect our way of life, because people just complying with this and giving away bodily autonomy, that's not protecting our way of life. And we don't have a way of life. We don't have a Canadian way of life left anymore, in my view, if we don't have the right to choose what goes into our own bodies, and we don't have the right to choose what health choices we make.
Right.
So, when exactly did you start the march? I've forgotten.
Yeah, February the 20th. So February the 12th, and I'm sure you're aware, but some of your viewers may not be aware, is when I made, just to put a little more background into how all this started. February the 12th, I felt, after witnessing everything that happened over 2 years, after being, at the wrong end of the mandates, losing, my employment, and seeing the protests, and then seeing how the Emergency Act was used to sweep people away, off the hill. Feeling outraged enough, and realizing what a ethical violation was occurring, that I felt compelled, to go out in uniform and make this announcement. Number one, calling out the government policies. Number two, announcing my intention to do this as a form of protest. And so February the 12th is when I released 2 videos, one on TikTok and one on YouTube, I believe. And then February 20th is when I announced we were starting. That's when we started in Vancouver, outside of BC Place, by the Terry Fox Memorial downtown. And so far we've been at it for 109 days.
And
This is day 109.
Who do you have with you? Because I see it's not just you. You've got a bit of a team that are making
100%, yeah. Yeah, not long. I mean, within probably a day after going out and making those videos on social media, I had people offering to assist me, and they wanted to be a part of what I was doing. So I kind of, I was prepared for nobody to care, and I was prepared for, maybe some people to kind of take notice, but I wasn't prepared for the number of people that came forward to say, yes, we want to help you, we want to be a part of this, how can we contribute? And I realized that, this was going to become something a lot bigger than I ever thought. So right now I have 12 people on the ground with me, and I have probably about 20 or 30 people who have volunteered to help me online with all of the social media platform management and our website. So with me right now, Christian, he's the one carrying the camera. I think you met him earlier.
Yeah, I
Or he's
did.
carrying a phone, I should say. I got Ben and Dallas in behind me. So Christian and Dallas. Um, Tyler, he's driving the safety car. We got the other guy in orange, Logan Murphy, action photographer. He's been present at a lot of rallies and stuff out in Alberta. So, that's just a handful of them. There's Ben's sister Beth is with our support vehicles. Dave, Dan, Esther's originally from Saskatchewan, but she was in Texas when she saw the first two videos and was determined to come back up here and be a part of this. So she drove back up to Canada from Texas. And it's really an amazing group of people on the ground with me. Without their help, I never would have made it this far, this fast. That's for sure. And I never would have made it this far, this fast without the help of the folks, just who have been contributing in donations or opening their homes to us or pulling over to offer encouragement. It has been an amazing experience, and despite the suffering and the hardship, certain, the physical, sometimes mental strain, it's like I'm actually, if anything good has been said to come out of all this mess, this is something else. Like, I mean, meeting folks from Vancouver here to Ontario and Sault Ste. Marie. These are some of the kindest, most generous people, selfless. It's overwhelming sometimes to really try and explain it all.
So for viewers, I put a link in the chat to James's first video, the one where he's in uniform, and that looks like, was that at a protest in BC that you were at?
Yeah, that's right. So I had made the decision to do this march, and a lot of it was done on instinct, like with a very ham-fisted approach. I kind of, built learn how to use, WordPress, made a very amateurish kind of website. And then I knew that I was going to have to get out there and find some sort of media outlet. And so the TikTok video was a practice run. I don't know if that's still up somewhere. I think it might still be on our YouTube channel, the James Topp YouTube channel. And then the one at that's at Sumas in Abbotsford. It's not too far from, I think it's the 252nd Avenue border crossing in BC.
All right. So, I mean, you've suggested this, and we were talking about before about all the wonderful people you've met, and I've heard a few cars honking as they've passed you by. Overall, how would you say the response from people as you're passing through towns or you're passing by people? What would you say the overall response has been?
Oh, it's been incredible. I mean, to say that I was prepared for much more abuse, that would be an understatement. I was not prepared for the level of support and encouragement that we're all experiencing. Honestly, it's been unbelievable. Like, I mean, for the people who have waved and offered support, like, I mean, the traffic's starting to die down. Just as we got on this stretch of highway here, at least 4 or 5 people have actually seen us marching, pulled off to the side of the road, and jumped out of the cars to come out and say hello. So, that the number of times people have had, to kind of like drive by and say something insulting out the window has been, after 109 days, I could probably still count it on, 2 hands. So it's been much more support and encouragement than any kind of negativity, in all honesty.
All right, so ratio of positivity to negativity, I'm hearing are probably 10-1 or maybe even more,
Oh,
20-1.
absolutely, but probably even 101.
Oh, okay. Well, that's really good to hear because it's hard to gauge what the Canadian people actually think, and you mentioned the violent suppression of the Freedom Convoy, and the media sure tries to spin it or present it in a way that the vast majority of Canadians were in favor of the Freedom Convoy being put down, that people were against the Freedom Convoy, that people are fed up and hate all these quote unquote anti-vaxxers. But it doesn't sound like that's the reality on the ground. It's not the reality I saw when I was in Ottawa. Now, I was only there for a weekend during the Freedom Convoy, but that's what I'm hearing from you is that
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. And I mean, so the other thing is that, like I'm sure you're aware, that there was one story released in the mainstream or the corporate media about me recently, and that's the fact that I'm being charged under the National Defense Act, under Section 129 or Article 129, conduct prejudice to good order and discipline or something like that. And so that was the story they chose to go with. And in no point at time do they mention anything about me marching across the country in that article or any of those articles. So that's the other element of this. And even despite this media blackout, I'm still amazed at the folks who have heard about this and have coming out to, like, even as we were coming through Northern Ontario in some of the most rural areas, I still had, like at a minimum 5 times a day, people just kind of driving past and say, "Hey, are you that soldier that's marching across the country?" I'm like, it's amazing to see how this has got out there. And it continues, I think, to gain momentum in that way as, we're going to get, this was part of it. I suspected it was going to happen, which is one of the reasons, why I decided to march along the side of the highway. It's pretty hard to ignore day after day of seeing this and have people not, kind of ask questions.
Yeah, well, we've just got a comment here from Tammy Douglas saying legacy media should be ashamed of themselves. Yeah, I agree, Tammy, and
I agree.
It's very distressing because, I mean, ethically, the media is supposed to be not propagandists, but just a neutral kind of presenting of this is what's going on, this is the news. But it does the way that they selectively report on certain things and don't report on others, to me, seems more propaganda-like than news.
It's unbelievable, and the insidious way that they have turned Canadians against each other is, if it's not a crime, it should be. But what is really a crime is what this team has accomplished with the online folks, is that all of the men and women with me, I didn't know any of them before February the 20th. Christian and Dallas, I met them on February the 20th. So we've been together all this time, and if this isn't a human interest story to capture your attention and imagination, I don't know what is. Like, this is the real deal.
Yeah, absolutely, and and it's a shame. I mean, I know it's no surprise to you because I remember in your video you said that you knew there would be consequences for you speaking out in uniform and you were ready to take whatever is coming. But it is still a shame that you have been charged. And yeah, just for viewers looking at Section 129 of the National Defense Act, it makes it an offense for any act, conduct, disorder, or neglect to the prejudice of good order and discipline is an offense. Although, I mean, we won't get into it too much. I'm sure you've got very able counsel to assist you with that, and it's going to get hashed out in court. But I mean, you weren't calling for people to soldiers to mutiny or anything like that. I don't really see how what you've done is prejudicial to good order and discipline. But I mean, to the contrary, I think you're doing what people what should be done. But you know, it's unfortunate that there's always too few that are willing to do what needs to be done. You see it throughout history, right? And you often see it with all walks of life, but you see it with military as well. A lot of times in various dictatorships in the past, there'll be a few officers who will maybe oppose something evil and they go down for it, but a lot of people just go along with it. But you know, we're proud of you, and I'm just seeing lots of. I haven't been able to read all of them, but as we're talking here, I've been getting lots of supportive messages coming through our chat. So Canadian Explorer here is asking about the expected arrival date in Ottawa. My understanding is you're expected to arrive July 1st, or is it June 30th?
No, yeah. No, it's a good question. There's two parts to it. Way back when and it's important that folks understand this too, is that there's a method here. There's a purpose. That's why we have marching with purpose. I'm not just going there to wave my arms in the air and say, here I am, okay? So I have, before we set off, and with the help of the team, I wrote a letter to every member of parliament and senator, and we mailed them out, and we emailed them way back in early April. And we invited them all to a discussion because there was a discussion that needed to be had with regards to mandates, how they've affected workers, and the damage that's been done and continues to be done. So that was done. We selected a date to meet with senators on the 22nd of June. And given the type of activity we're doing, it was a slight miscalculation. And also, we ran into a little bit of hardship coming through the mountains. So we amended the date, but we amended the date of my march to the War Memorial, but not the date for my appointment with senators. So there's going to be a meeting that I have with members of Parliament on the 22nd of June, at which point, wherever I am, at that point, we're going to drive in, have the meeting with the members of Parliament, drive back, and then march until we arrive at the War Memorial on the 30th of June. So that's not my expected arrival date, that's my target arrival date, because I've announced it on my website and on the social media platforms. So all I need to do is maintain my current heading and speed, and I will arrive there, and then incorporate the appropriate rest days, and I will arrive there on June 30th, probably mid to late afternoon, early evening, something like that. And so does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. So that you said you've got a meeting with members of Parliament on June 22nd. So there are actually members of the House of Commons who are, or the Senate, who are willing to meet with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Are you at liberty to tell us who you're going to be meeting with?
What has become apparent to me is that there is we're going to keep the names close to our chest for the time being, because I don't we're going to release it on our website. What I don't want to happen is to have members of Parliament unnecessarily or sent messages that are negative, because folks are kind of excited about this whole thing. However, I will tell you there's 12 of them, including one member who is NDP.
Oh, really?
And there's the possibility of more of them changing their minds. But what we have managed to communicate and get through the kind of bureaucratic, play the ping pong game of communications that's required in this kind of with this kind of effort, right? So I have to communicate with the secretary, and then they send back, and then we send back another message, and it goes like this until we actually have a phone call or something. But at the end of the day, yes, I have gotten the attention of the House of Commons, and there are a number who are going to come and meet with us. And names to be released. What I will say is that the members of Parliament that I have spoken to on the phone are very pleased and encouraged by what I'm doing, and I applaud their courage in saying yes and coming to have this meeting with me. And just to talk about that for a sec, the meeting that I'm going to have with them has a point and an agenda as well. So it's, again, we posted that part up on our website. The agenda items that we want to speak to members of Parliament about are repealing mandates, reinstating workers, getting restitution for wages lost, and there's a number of bullet points underneath each heading. But as I have gone down the road on this journey, I've met thousands of people along the way now, and we introduced a fourth R, so we're calling it 3 + 1 Rs. So our fourth R is repair, because what I'm seeing is a divide that I've never seen before in this country. We've had a new belief system imposed on our society, and depending on what you believe about health and health prevention, this is where we're at with this. And we have this section of the population now who was alienated back in January and early February, and they are let's call them part of the freedom movement, quote unquote. And then there's folks that I've met who, the mandates have become a secondary issue to them now. Their issue is with the federal government, and to say intense dissatisfaction with the current government is one of the things they expressed to me. That's an understatement when I use those words. So this is, alarming to me, because this is the kind of thing I've seen overseas in places like the former Yugoslavia, okay? We got an unhappy population, rising gas prices, inflation, public debt, people pissed off at each other, and it's not good. And I want to talk to our members of Parliament about this, because we need to do something to fix it.
Yeah, and that's great to hear, and I really like the healing aspect of what you're doing, and I like your quote that you've got on your website with of Canada Marches, where about you, as a quote from you saying, "Can't we all just have respect and compassion for each other and call it a day?" Because it's that lack of respect and compassion is something that I've seen a lot over the last couple of years, and I mean, honestly, both sides are guilty of that. I mean, both sides. I mean, that's a problem, that there's even sides here. That's something that not the Canada I grew up in.
Yeah, exactly.
These sorts of divides, and we need to, we need to try to repair that and get back to where we were. But I say both sides, but I can certainly see why a lot of people are unhappy. I mean, a lot of people have had their lives turned upside down. You've had a 28-year career of distinction come to somewhat of a dead end as a result of this. I'm self-employed, so I've been able to skirt this because I set my own rules. But my volunteer PR guy, Richard, who helps me with Don't Talk TV, he got kicked out of college for his medical choices. His fiance got fired from her job working as a phlebotomist at a hospital. So lots of people have lost a lot of things that have meant a lot to them. So, and talk about the worst possible timing to be losing jobs and things like that, as you mentioned. the inflation, the cost of living. I mean, things are tough, so you can see why people are angry. But we're not going to get out of this by fighting even more, I don't think.
No, 100%. And this is what I see happening as well. And one of the tasks that I've kind of taken on as part of this overall mission is this connecting the disparate voices from these different organizations that I've met with, and individuals, because that's the way out of this. I think it's educating folks in what it means to be a citizen, what it means to be a voter, telling them, to be perfectly honest, okay, before I sent out 338 letters to all of the members of parliament, I didn't know how many members of parliament there actually were, okay? Mm-hmm. So I think this is a part of it, connecting them, educating them, because what I saw and what I see happening with regards to, like I said, this freedom movement, it's kind of funny because I just, we're calling it this freedom movement for lack of a better term. There's no actual leader or, founding principles or anything. It's just unorganized. And I think this is the way forward if we can organize folks and get them to realize that this is the answer to this kind of imbalance that we have in our society right now, and that we have too much power in too few hands. And they can correct that simply by, becoming active, educating themselves, and making their voices heard. And it doesn't take that much effort, really. You practice, you write a letter, you print it, sign it, and you mail it. And believe it or not, it has an effect because of you done it. You know what I mean? Like, this is what I think it's going to take for us to get out of this. So this is part of what we're doing here in that repair piece. And what I've seen happening is that, the folks that are, how do I put this? Are willing to think outside of the box and I run the risk of being labeled, but when they start thinking for themselves, this is what we're encouraging. This is what I think is the answer to this and how we're going to repair this kind of just unprecedented situation I think we find ourselves in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. Well, it's unprecedented for Canada.
Yeah.
So, one thing I find myself mentioning a lot over the last couple of years is my wife grew up in communist Poland. And, her family fled communism with just the clothes on their backs and came to Canada. And her and a lot of her Polish friends, they all say the same thing. They say they have seen stuff like this before, but they never thought they'd see it in Canada. They thought they had escaped a lot of this kind of stuff when they got out of communist Poland. But just going back to members of parliament you're meeting, I understand that you're meeting one non-member of parliament, but a leader of the party, Maxime Bernier, from the People's Party of Canada. You're not just meeting him; he's going to walk the last 30 kilometers with you. Is that right?
That's the plan. Yeah. Apparently, right now we're going to wait until the dates get a little bit closer. He wants to march in. Roman Baber also contacted me. He wants to march for a few kilometers in Sudbury. So, this is getting attention in some circles for sure. And but Mr. Bernier he's not coming to that meeting with me on the 22nd. That's just the team, the steering committee at Canada Marches. Tom Morazzo from Veterans for Freedom, because we are in partnership right now, to kind of find a way forward. I don't expect that when we have this meeting, these members of parliament are going to be able to just turn around, flick a switch, and bang, it all goes back to everybody gets what they want, and done deal. I don't expect that to happen. So there are contingency plans in place for that, and that will be dependent. What route we take, which option we choose is going to be contingent on the conversation that it had on the 22nd. But where what I would like to say is that we are making attempts, like I said, to bring groups together, have a common message, move forward in a positive direction, utilize peaceful legal means of protest and education, I would add, so that we can kind of get ourselves back on track as a country. Like, just to put it out there, I'm just, how anybody in the armed forces, public service of any branch, or whatever federal government department thinks that, this was acceptable, to, withhold people's paychecks if they don't, submit to a medical procedure, and how people are not seeing this as an absolute ethical, moral violation. I think this is a part of where we need to educate people on that.
Yeah, I think you're right. Education is huge, and it's amazing to me. Maybe it shouldn't be, but the medical profession is on board with this too. I mean, treating people against their will is, one of the most basic of basic principles of medical ethics that you don't do. Yeah, you can find it up until recently. You could find it anywhere. College of Physicians and Surgeons websites, anything talking about like you must have consent of the patient. And it just boggles my mind that people think this is consent when people are getting a medical treatment so they can keep their job or so they can visit a family member who's in a home or some of that. That's incredibly coercive. Criminal law is what I do most of my work in. And that, like in other contexts, it's clear. If you tell someone do this or you're going to lose your job, that would be clear coercion and would not be consent. Yet somehow when it's in this medical context, it's all good. It's amazing.
I'm chuckling because I still cannot believe, or I just cannot pinpoint exactly when it happened that I stepped through the Twilight Zone door and we're in this upside down land. Because you're absolutely right. It's just that is all absolutely shocking to me. And one other thing I would say too, one of the things that compelled me, as I went along and journeyed down this road, to speak out and continue to speak out against these issues is big. I see this at a behavioral modification exercise in that, we went from distancing, masking, vaccinations. If we don't do something now, what's next? We had vaccine passports. I do believe that if the protests hadn't happened in Ottawa, we would be in full-blown vaccine passport territory right now. But I think, certain officials and politicians were smelling which way the wind was blowing.
Okay.
And that's one of the reasons why.
That's interesting, because I was actually having this debate with Richard before, because I was almost wondering if the Freedom Convoy didn't backfire, and the reason we are under still such strict restrictions at a federal level is out of vindictiveness or revenge for the Freedom Convoy. But your view is that we'd be even worse off if not for the Freedom Convoy.
100%. And I will say this. about why I believe the federal government is still maintaining these policies is because what they have done is with the application of these mandates, either intentionally or unintentionally, they have removed anybody with a conscience from the system. So it is effectively a purge, and they've got rid of, or at least identified, furthermore, got a list of anybody who is, expressed their their discontent or who has openly not complied, and those folks are out. They're not in that system anymore of government, right? So what do you have left? What do you have left in the federal government now? You've got everybody who's going to toe the line.
Yeah, they'll just do it. Yeah, and to that point, it struck me when the Chief of Defense Staff directive that you referenced earlier was first implemented. It really struck me. There's one paragraph in there where it says that members who remain unvaccinated could have their security clearance revoked or reduced because of concerns over their reliability and loyalty to the institution. So since when does
exactly
of a medical treatment have anything to do with reliability or loyalty to the institution? That sounds like ideological purity test, not concern for health.
Yeah, I think that was a clause put in there for the sole purpose of like I said, it was, you now have identified the people who are going to, act out of conscience, and they're gone or will be. And this is one of the reasons why I feel compelled to do this. It's to stop this slide because, in the federal government right now, both in the public service and in the D&D, you're required to go on the intranet or the internal networks and put in there your vaccination status and whether you what dose you have and when you got it. So what I see happening with that, so this is actual software that's on government networks, and if you are unwilling to disclose or remain unvaccinated, that's it, that's all, you leave without pay.
Yeah.
And what I see, it's like, okay, so we let this go, we let it slide, and then how much longer is it before now you have to go in there on the software, indicate you got your third shot, and then you have to indicate you got your fourth shot, and how much longer after that is it going to be, given some of the laws that are currently being tabled? How much longer is it going to be before you have to start indicating, what YouTube channels you're subscribed to,
or political beliefs you have, or
exactly,
or I mean, you just extrapolating this out. I mean, 2 years ago this would have sounded completely insane, but it doesn't sound completely insane anymore. How long before they start saying, you have to record, are you on birth control, or are you sterilized, or how many children do you have, or that you're polluting the world and causing a bigger carbon footprint with. Yeah, I mean, that's it. Once that door is open, and that bodily autonomy doesn't exist anymore, there's no telling what could be done next. But just circling back to the education, I think that's a very, very important factor, because there's a lot of people, I think, who aren't of bad will, that they just went and got the vaccine anyway because that's what they would have done, and that's their choice. I'm fully in favor of people making their own choices. If you want it, then go ahead. But I think a lot of them, since it didn't impact them because they would have gotten it anyway, and maybe they don't know anyone, or a lot of the people who didn't get it, they just vanished one day and you never really knew what happened to them. People don't see the human side of what's happening with these mandates until they actually meet someone like you, or if they happen to have someone in their family. And that seems to be a big one, because there's, in my own life, there's a few people that I've known that, they just kind of got it and went along with their life and didn't think too much of it. But then, it'll come to light of they want to go out for dinner. Well, I mean, there aren't vaccine passports for going to a restaurant, but a few months ago, going for dinner, and well, why can't you come? Well, yeah, me and my family can't come because certain medical choices. And then all of a sudden it kind of clicks, like, oh, this actually does have real world consequences. And the media doesn't put a human face on it at all, right? They always present, they find the real outlier people who say regrettable things or do regrettable things and say, oh, look, see, these are what these people are like. So they're very othered. And so it's easy to think, okay, there's just these few crazy fanatics who are against all vaccines, and so it doesn't have that human connection. So things like what you're doing is really important for that aspect of the education, to show that, no, these are real, normal, everyday Canadian people that are being very severely impacted by this.
That's right. And to that point, that's one of the things we're doing at Canada Marches, is that that's another, implied task I kind of saw on this mission, to take those stories and document them. And we do that right now. We have audio files being sent in, letters being sent in, and I mean, it's across the board. I mean, it's not just, you have federal government workers, nurses, doctors, corporate sector. I've talked to telecommunication folks, pilots, okay? It's unbelievable. And so they've all been affected by this, and we are trying to collect that I don't like to call them stories, because it's not fiction, right? It's just a personal account, a direct personal account, a witness statement, if you will, of somebody who was been cast aside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've seen you've got quite a few videos on CanadaMarches.ca. If viewers want to go there, CanadaMarches.ca/stories. There's quite a few videos, and I think that's a good way of putting it. These are witness statements of what's happening here, and it's very important to document that and put that human face on it. So I just want to. We've been talking for getting close to an hour. I know you're gonna have to take a break at some point, so just let me know. You're talking to me while marching down the road, so you can let me know anytime you need to take a break. But if people have questions, post them. And one person said, "Thank you, sir," on there. I forget the name of the person, but I just need to point out, James isn't a sir; he works for a living. That was the line I always got as a young officer cadet. If anyone accidentally called one of the warrant officers sir, like, I'm not sir, I work for a living.
True, yeah. Like, we don't like to be called sir. I'm not a commissioned officer. I'm an NCO, and it's not my title.
Yeah. So for people who are not as familiar with the rank structure, a warrant officer is a non-commissioned member, non-commissioned officer. So it's one rank above sergeant. So you've got privates, corporals, master corporals, sergeants, and then warrant officer. So, James, do you have any? Will you ever run for political office, or you're not interested in politics?
Only if the only that's been it's been posed a couple of times. How do I put it? It's not something I'm interested in, but if folks thought that I would be good at it and I would be something that would be in a position to facilitate some real change, then I would definitely consider it. Not because it's something I actually wanted to do, but at this point, I just, to say that I think we have a lack of leadership like I said before, to say that's an understatement. Like we need some strong voices out there, and they're out there. I mean, we've had. I was actually considering this earlier. We've had, which is alarming to say the least, members of provincial parliament arrested and put in jail, which I find absolutely. I still am in a state of disbelief over that. So, they're out there, but I think we need more of them, right? If folks out there would something that they wanted me to do, then I would, definitely, I would consider it. Let me put it that way.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think those are the type of people we need in office too. The people who aren't there because they want to do it or because they want to have some high office. For the people who are there just to serve, kind of maybe grudgingly, maybe unwillingly, but because they have something to offer, they'll be there. So, well, I live in Ontario, so I wouldn't be able to vote for you, but I would if if I lived in BC and you did run. But you're right. I mean, yeah, members of the provincial parliament being arrested, members of the federal parliament. Well, I suppose Maxime Bernier wasn't a member of parliament anymore when he was arrested. But I mean, again, we keep on saying unprecedented things in Canada. Never thought I'd see a day where
No.
people. I mean, these are, in my view, these are people being arrested for political crimes. This is political prosecution that's going on, and same with, you look at the leaders of the Freedom Convoy, like Tamara Litch and Chris Barber. I mean, they've been denied bail. I mean, they ultimately got bail. Tamara Litch got bail on basically she appealed her original bail decision. I mean, I can tell you as a criminal defense lawyer who routinely gets people out on bail who are caught with literally enough fentanyl in their possession to kill the entire city that I work in, they can get out on bail no problem, and they have a bad prior criminal record. But if you organized a peaceful protest, you get denied bail. I mean, that's pure political prosecution. I mean,
And again, yeah, it's unbelievable. And again, I laugh because I'm in, when I hear this stuff, I I don't know what else to do.
Yeah, well, you have to laugh sometimes, otherwise you'll cry.
Yeah,
I think,
exactly.
or there's a saying sometimes they'll say in my line of work, again, criminal defense, is if you can't laugh at tragedy, you'll never laugh in this line of work.
Yeah, yeah, it is shocking beyond belief, and so yeah, I don't know what to say about it anymore. I would say that too. It's the entire political system as a whole, I think, has worked to really, unintentionally or unintentionally, just disengage or get folks to disengage from it to the point where they're not interested
Yeah.
in the process, and they believe that their voices don't matter, their votes don't matter, and then this is why we are in this situation as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, in Ontario, we just had a provincial election last week, and it was the lowest voter turnout in history, in Ontario history, lowest voter turnout ever. 18% of the voting population of Ontario voted for the Progressive Conservatives, and they have a majority government off 18% because I think something like 60% of those eligible to vote didn't vote. So that goes directly to the disengagement. I think another problem is it's really come to light over the last 2 years, the lack of checks and balances in the Canada's system as it exists. I mean, I've said this a number of times on Don't Talk TV. In principle, I'm a monarchist. I'm very in favor of the monarchy and having the Queen as our head of state, or a king. But the way it actually works on the ground in practice nowadays is all power is vested in the office of the Prime Minister, essentially, because he can tell all the members of his party how they have to vote. So they'll all vote however he wants them to vote. The Prime Minister chooses who the Senate is, and the Senate essentially, for the most part, now with some notable exceptions, tends to just rubber stamp whatever Parliament does. And I think part of that is because they're not elected, so they feel like they can't they need to just go along with what the elected people do because they're not elected. And then the Queen, by way of the Governor General, doesn't actually exercise power. I would rather have a monarchy where the monarch actually exercises power and maybe vetoes some things once in a while or doesn't agree with things. But because as it stands right now, there's way too much power in the hands of a few people with no checks and balances.
I think I agree with you completely, except for the monarchy part. So it's good that we have this conversation, because here we are. We have differing opinions on a couple of things, and I'm okay with it. I'm sure we both are.
Yeah.
But one thing I will agree with is that I'm glad you brought it up, and I wasn't alone in my judgment of the situation as well, because what I saw and continue to see is this that all of these branches of government are broken in some way with regards to the Senate, the court, and the House of Commons, and you can point to the concentration of power in the PMO, and as I do this 11 hours, well, coming up on 11 hours and 15 minutes, I have a lot of time to think about this stuff. And I was able to ask for a friend for some academic books and papers that point to that, and this is something I think that's been happening in the House of Commons now for a couple of generations, if not longer. And my question to that is, so what's the answer and what's the response? What do we do? And I think I don't think the situation is hopeless. I think we have some options with regards to that and how to fix it. But that again goes to the education piece, right? Mm-hmm. And getting folks to realize that they can be a part of the political system. It doesn't mean they have to run for office. All they got to do is take part and make informed choices and understand how everything works.
Yeah, and realize they have power, because individually people feel like they don't have power, so that's why you get 60% of the population not voting. But imagine if that 60% of people voted, and imagine if they voted for someone other than the same old. There could be a real shakeup in Canadian politics, and if there was a shakeup, that might start bringing some of that accountability or some change, because then the people in power realize, okay, we really need to listen to the people that we're supposed to be serving rather than ruling over, that we need to serve them and listen and maybe change the way things are done a bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, one thing I've been meaning to mention, but we kind of got off on some other interesting topics, is you were saying you were wondering, when did you enter the twilight zone of all this stuff? To me, the entry into the twilight zone was Friday, August the 13th of 2021. That was when Transport Minister Alghabra made the announcement that there would be vaccine mandates for travel and for the federal public service and for the military. Because I remember very clearly, right up until that day, like even the day before, everyone was saying there will never be mandates. That's a conspiracy theory. We can't have vaccine mandates because of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Canada's a country of the rule of law. It'll never happen. I remember the Department of National Defense, FAQ, had, like, up until that day, well, actually up until a few days after, said that for members of the armed forces, the vaccine is voluntary. It will be voluntary. It will continue to be voluntary. It will not be mandatory. And then, boom, just one press conference, and all of a sudden, everything flipped. Within a day, it was absolutely astounding to me. Even lawyers who, up until then, had been saying, no, it'll never happen because it's totally illegal. It cannot happen under our laws. After that, same lawyers going on to CTV and CBC saying, well, actually, this can be done. Here's what the law says, et cetera, et cetera.
I agree. It was, for me at that point, being employed by the federal government, that's when, yeah, absolutely. That's when the earth kind of split open. and
Yeah.
started to swallow us all. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and it seemed like everyone jumped on board that. As soon as Minister
Yeah.
Alcabra said that, all the private businesses, people, like that's when they all started vaccine mandates too, because there weren't any anywhere before that. And I mean, and then it even went to the extent, I don't know if you know this, but right now in Ontario, and it's been like this since I think last September, to serve on a jury, you have to be quote unquote fully vaccinated against COVID-19. You're not allowed to be a juror if you haven't received that.
Unbelievable.
Which it's incredible, but everyone is just it's just amazing how mentality's changed on a dime, because I argued against that. I actually had a jury trial like 2 days after that was imposed, saying that you need to be fully vaccinated to be a juror. I objected to that in a jury trial that I was starting just a couple days after that, and I remember the judge was just like, he was looking at me like I was speaking Martian and had 3 heads. He was just like, he was just dumbfounded that I had any issue with this. He was like I even said, like, Mr. Wansbutter, I don't understand how can you have any objection to this? Like, this is just saving lives. I don't understand why you're saying this to me. So, I mean, it's
Yeah, I agree, and I think it was just because of the fact that we have this kind of you know, the reality that we see in front of our faces for a lot of us is different from the reality that folks got projected onto their brains by their phones and their televisions and stuff. So I think that's part of the problem.
Yeah. So I'm glad to see, as we're walking here, I haven't seen one person drive by or anything kind of negative, but I see every few minutes you're waving, someone's honking. So it's good to see the continued support as you're walking along the highway at getting close to 7:45 on a Wednesday evening.
Yeah, it's approaching the end of the day here. Well, I mean, for folks, well, for us and for people, traffic dying down. But yeah, it was pretty. Like, this is what keeps us going, right? It's the encouragement. And earlier today, we walked through Sault Ste. Marie. Folks are coming out of the woodwork to say hello, and like I said, it was it's pretty inspiring to see them. Like, I'm proud of the Canadian public, and the ones that have chosen to stand up for themselves in spite of the losses. Like, I mean, folks that are leaving Ontario who have sold everything, sold their houses, they're leaving Ontario, moving out west. It's just it's unbelievable. Like, so in a way, it's tragic too, but in another way, you got to applaud them for not just going along to get along.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're getting close to the end here. I'm gonna let you off soon and have a break, but let me just ask you something maybe a little bit out of the left field, a little bit different. We've been talking a lot about your march and about all this kind of stuff, but just something a little more personal. Richard actually suggested this to me.
Okay.
Do you have a favorite book or a favorite movie?
Ooh. Yeah, book? Nah, I can't really think of one. Like, I mean, I've read a lot of books. To say off the top of my head if I have a favorite that I could identify right now. Hang on a sec. Just tell Dave we'll go one more kilometer. So, yeah, a favorite book. Let me come back to that. But probably my favorite movie is Raiders of the Lost Ark. I saw it when I was a little kid, and yeah, just kind of simple action adventure. Actually, you know what? one of the books that I read, and I was never particularly into any kind of like, how do I put it? Okay, I read a lot of Stephen King. Okay, and
Yeah,
he's not the
I'm a fan
greatest.
of Stephen King too. Nothing
Well,
wrong with that.
yeah, I kind of cooled off on some of his books just recently, but to say that, I'm not really familiar with authors except for um, this one story that I read as a younger guy was Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad.
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever read it.
I mean, I'm familiar with it. I think I read half of it in university and found
Yeah,
it really difficult going and shifted and read a
I,
different book.
I agree. And the only reason why I read it was because that was the basis of the story for Apocalypse Now.
Yes, that's
But
right.
I kind of liked it just because it was, it was a difficult read, but it was, how do I put it? Uh, looking at the eyes of somebody who was alive kind of, 200 years ago,
Hmm.
looking at the world through their eyes, the way they wrote the book.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, the movie is set in during the Vietnam War, but the novel that it's based upon is 1800s colonial.
Yeah,
I think it's the
yeah,
Congo that
that's right. That's right.
Belgian Congo.
It was about incursions of merchants into the interior of Africa to find more ivory.
Right. Yeah. So we got another comment here. This is a good one here from Linda Shaw. Says, James, millions of Canadians are proud of you. Thank you for what you're doing. So, and I want to echo that. I want to thank you and your team. Thank you for doing what you're doing. Thank you for having the integrity and courage to do what you're doing. And thank you for joining me on Don't Talk TV. It's been a great chat. It's been great having you. And yeah, keep up the good work, and I wish you all the success. I mean, I don't expect everything to drop the day that you meet with those members of parliament, but I think it's a very important step, right? We've talked about all these different themes about the education, the reparation. I mean, uh, you know, I guess to use a cliche, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. And I mean, there have been first steps already, but this is another step on that journey. And we need people like you to take those steps. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me on the show. Thank you for what you do as well, because I think when I've talked to members of the different groups that I've come into contact with, such as, like Taking Back Our Freedoms, Veterans for Freedom, Police on Guard. So these are all groups that were kind of aligning, in order to bring about these changes we're talking about. Um, we talk about these things, and one of the things that I see as an overall strategy to get us out of this is this small and medium business communities and good journalism, good honest journalism, like what you're doing, is what's going to get us out of this. I think because when you have honest reporting and investigation and the ability to have conversations and trade ideas and thoughts, is completely contrary to what we're seeing now in the controlled and scripted corporate media that we have. So thank you for that effort that you're making.
Well, you're very welcome. So yeah, it's been a great chat again. And so thank you. I've got to do my lawyerly caveat to this video. Of course, nothing in this video is legal advice. If you need legal advice, call a lawyer. You can call me or another lawyer. My website is wansbutter.com. So if you need to look up my contact information, you can go there. As always, if there's any shows, topics you'd like to see me cover, please leave a comment in the comment section or email us. And if you found this video at all interesting, helpful, or informative, please consider to like, share, and subscribe, and follow us on social media. That's our social media stuff's been going along the little bar on the bottom there. And make sure you check out Canada Marches to support James Topp. And again, James, thank you very much. It's been fantastic, and all the best.
Thank you, and thanks everybody who tuned in and offered their encouragement.